Welcome to the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Lori Rivers, and this is just a short podcast episode to explain why there are no new episodes on Spotify. This is very simple, and it's very astrological as well. So let me get into it. First of all, it's over the Joe Rogan situation. If you're a fan of his, you'll probably just want to be on your way. If you're not a fan of his, listen to the episode before this one where I roasted his chart, if you haven't already. Frankly, I'm very dismayed by the amount of middle-aged white men supporting good old Joe because of his freedom of speech. He can, we shouldn't be able to go after people for saying things like grab them by the pussy. Now, he didn't say that. Somebody else who got elected president did. Because free speech. There used to be something called incitement. You were not allowed to incite people to violence. You weren't allowed to incite people to riot. You weren't allowed to incite people. And in today's society, if we want to call it that, given the polarization, the fact that he is feeding both misogyny, bigotry, and racism, and more than doing his fair share to stir the pot when it comes to the COVID situation, I can't be on Spotify. Now, I have a minuscule audience. Minuscule. Compared to his. I'm okay with that. So I've moved my podcast over to Patreon for right now. We'll get a different RSS feed. This will be the last episode that will be on Spotify until there's a change of tune. But I don't think so. I don't think there will be. And it's going to have to crumble through other means. If you think you're just one person and deleting your Spotify app won't help, I disagree. Because money is the bottom line. They said it. They make money from him. And they have ambition. And so they're willing to compromise any values or principles in the name of money. Well, we have Pluto in the final degrees of Capricorn. And that just doesn't fly. That doesn't fly. This jock mentality, this, we're just a bunch of boys in a locker room. It's been celebrated for a long time. And what's funny, what has been derided for a long time have been intelligent women speaking out against such behavior because we're no fun. Because, a little tickle and a little, pop should be fun, and we just should get better senses of humor. He's not a funny man. And I don't think he is a nice man. What passes for nice, decent guys in the United States is a low bar. It's a low bar. And until we little guys start taking action, be it deleting an app, removing a podcast, well, we just enable the fuel that fires up authoritarian-driven, white male patriarchal behavior. And that doesn't move us forward very fast. It keeps us stuck. And I feel as even though I have a very small audience in comparison to his, I still have one. And as a woman with a strong voice and strong opinions, I feel it's essential and necessary to remove this podcast from Spotify. And I can't remove my podcast because I used software owned by Spotify to create it. Now, that makes perfect sense. It was a user agreement. It was a free software. They put me on Spotify. They had content. It was a fair exchange. And, so I'm not going to diss on them for that, but I will create and upload my podcast to my Patreon. And patrons will get early access. And then it'll be made public elsewhere. So not elsewhere, but, like the next day or two. But patrons get early access because I'm very fortunate. I'm a very fortunate woman. I don't have to go seek sponsors. I don't have to run after advertising dollars. I don't have to make a deal with Spotify. I know. And you guys let me know what you want. And you guys, and I mean my audience, let me know that you didn't want me there. I didn't want to be there either. So we move it over to Patreon, where my patrons sponsor us anyway. And so if you are new, and you don't have to join Patreon, you don't have to become a patron, not at all. And you guys who are new, I often walk around and pick up things around my house. So that's the background noise. But if you guys aren't patrons, that's fine. Just wait for the post to open up to the public. But do make sure you thank the patrons in the comment section. That's important. So the astrology, what's behind the astrology of this? Well, again, we've got Pluto in Capricorn, we've got Uranus in Taurus. Mercury was retrograde through the whole debacle, and partly, I'm just going to say this is going to blow up in their faces at some point because they made statements during the Mercury retrograde. Mercury is conjunct Pluto by, 4 or 5 degrees. And Mercury is now direct, and it's going to head back over Pluto. And frankly, I think this is going to smack them in the ass. I think Joe Rogan may have pissed somebody off, and they may leak information to the press. And Spotify may have not just a public relations nightmare on their hand. I think they may lose a shitload in stock. And I'm pulling my podcast not just out of principle. That's the number one reason. But because I want my digital assets saved from the potential fallout from this. I think they've decided to die on the wrong hill. And if you're going to be opinionated and piss people off, and remember, we see a lot of very wealthy, very powerful people having kind of a philosophical boxing match, and that tends to happen in leaked information and stock prices and things like that. Get ready, because it isn't over. That whole debacle came out during the Mercury retrograde, and so I just can tell who has astrologers working with them and who doesn't. So, if you want to have the latest updates or find out about the new and full moon reports, if you want to find out other roasts of other politicians, I'm collecting charts. If you want to see what else is on Patreon, there are public posts there. Not a ton. It's mostly patron-only content. But I post very frequently. So if you want to know about that and you're not a patron, head over to the link in the bio here. I've been a professional astrologer for 3 decades, and I have a very good batting average when it comes to predictions. Joe Rogan is going to have a very, very interesting time of it this year, and it's not going to be the easy win he thinks it is. And what's funny is he has a very big ego, and he's sitting very high right now, and he's thinking, haha, I won. And he's underestimated someone, and he's about to have his knees knocked out from underneath him that no black belt or brute force or belligerent attitude can save him from. So this Scorpio rising will look on with amusement as he gets his comeuppance just for being an asshole. I don't think you have to take the high road every time, but I think contributing to misinformation that puts children's lives at risk is egregious to make a buck. And I will say I've been a fan of Jon Stewart, but his comments on Joe Rogan have completely disappointed me. And I feel about as betrayed as I did as a little girl when the little boys decided to be they'll be guy pals and not want to be friends in public because it wasn't cool, you know. But they'd ask me for help with their homework or want to play a game when nobody else was around, because in early middle school or late elementary school, it wasn't cool to be friends with a girl. And I kind of feel the bro club is about to get broken up. And I urge every woman with strong opinions, every woman who's quite had enough, every woman who thinks there isn't a whole lot she can do, to remember you control most of the money in this country. Women control 60% of liquid assets in this country, budgets. It's up to you what streaming apps you use. There's a whole bunch, and we have alternatives in the Awake Space Discord. And if you're wondering, how can Lori be spiritual and political? Because it's always been about politics. Spirituality and politics go hand in hand. Ninth house, folks. Ninth house. Ninth house astrology. It's dogma, it's politics, it's preachers, it's the pulpit, it's the lectern, it's the professor. It's anything that can be debated. So, and I've been doing that part my whole life, preacher, teacher. So, if you're new, well, welcome to the mess. You can listen to the old episodes and get a sense of who I am. And if you want to hang out over at Patreon again, the podcast opens for the public about 24 hours after it does for patrons. Thank you so much for listening to this little rant and the astrology behind it. I'm Lori Rivers, your host of the Awake Space Astrology Podcast.